everyone. As Brian said, I'm Charter's Michelle Peng. I'm a senior reporter for Work and Leadership. And I'm joined today by Jennie Rogerson, Chief People Officer of Canva. And so you may know about Jennie's work at Canva, which is the online design and collaboration platform. And their mission is to empower the whole world with design. And so Jennie joined Canva back in 2019 as the very first person in leadership operations. And today she leads a people org that is over 400 people across the globe that dreams up Canva's unique culture. So we just heard from Danielle, Brian, and Katie about how you build and maintain these cultures that are high performance but human. So I know Canva is an organization that is known for this culture that has great vibes, that is super quirky and fun, but I think people often forget that it's also an extremely high-performing organization that's continued to hit all your growth targets, that's added millions of users and hundreds of employees. So I wanted to ask you, to start off, how do you fit in that culture of performance with this super fun and quirky culture?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here, and I think this is one of the most important conversations that we can be having, because I don't believe that one can exist without the other. I think that Canva, certainly when I joined, had a very big employer brand of being this kind of fun and quirky place, but wasn't really taken seriously in the performance aspect side of things. And I truly believe that you can only really have great culture if it's built on great performance. Without it, I think a kind of culture feels very fun for a time, but it's very shallow, and that won't go far. I think when you have great performance, you get a team that feels like they're rowing together, and I think that then enables you to build on top with some great culture. So one of the examples that we use at Canva was when I first joined, season openers were a big thing, right? We ran the company on a quarterly basis, but instead of doing fairly dry kind of quarters, we decided to base them around seasons. And so you'd have like a winter wonderland season where you would have everyone who was delivering great products stand up on stage and showcase what they were kind of had built in the last season, and then publicly declare the goals that they were going to set for the season ahead. And we really set this regimental kind of tempo of the company, but also really enabled this big celebration, right? You had this celebration of these amazing products that people were launching, and people would hustle hard to launch them that season opener because it was their one big shot to show with the whole company. And I think that's a good infusion of both culture and performance, right? It's based in performance because it's amazing things launching, and it's people feeling really proud and kind of celebrating very ceremoniously, but at the same time, that kind of fun and quirky, and people would dress up as like a massive inflatable snowman to showcase their designs. It was like a wild and wonderful time. But I think those two things can really come together and make the other one feel really good, kind of two sides of the same coin. I think very similarly, we've got clubs at Canva is a huge thing, right? We've got 450 plus clubs. So clubs could be anything from Dungeons and Dragons Club, or Bad Musicians Club, or Jigsaw Club, Soccer Club, whatever it is. If you're interested in something, there's a club for it. And the reason it was created was because there was this group of people who were playing soccer together from all from different teams, but they all came together, and like inevitably work comes up, right? And you start discussing it, and then you create this kind of great cross-functional discussion of people being like, I'm working on this, oh, well, I'm working on this, oh, I should connect you with this person. And so I think that's a similar thing of making sure that you're doing something fun and quirky and that employees really love, but it's based in building a really strong performance culture.
And employees receive institutional support for planning and programming for the clubs, right?
Exactly right, yeah. So there's a budget, et cetera, and kind of the club champion, and it's employee-driven. We just created the infrastructure, they create the clubs.
Yeah, that's amazing. And in your time at Canva, the headcount has grown, what is it, over 10 times?
Yeah, I think I joined at 450 and we're now 5,500.
Right, and so I think that's a really difficult task, is how do you scale a culture? So I'm curious, exactly that. How do you take a culture from 500 people to 5,000?
It's hard. I think being very honest, it's hard. I think being really resolute on what you are intentionally trying to keep. So for us, that's our mission, our 6 values. Sorry, Katie, with your 3 values, but we have 6. We've gone up 1 from the 5. Being really clear on those values and making sure they actually stand for something. They're not just written on the wall or something like that. They are genuinely lived by, and they are used in discussions. And then our guiding stars. So our guiding stars are 20 questions that we ask in our employee survey every 6 months that are 20 questions that we definitely want to achieve 100% on. So we kind of balked the trend of hundreds of questions, narrowed it down to 20, and those are the things that we are regularly pulsing on, and we are driving behind in our programs and our people programs. Those are the things that we have intentionally kept at the very heart of our culture. Everything else is up for debate, and it will change over time, right? I found this kind of weird culture at the very beginning of people kind of glorifying the good old days, and it was lovely, and there were so many things to be really proud of. And then there was a kind of shift of like, okay, how can we do justice to those things and stay true to what we were trying to do with them, but scale them? So one of the examples was when I joined, there was this awful, awful ritual that we did, which was when it was your birthday, you would stand up on a table and everyone would dance around you and sing you happy birthday. And it was the most it happened to me once, and I was like, this is going. This has to go. It was mortifying, but it also worked because we were, a small company all in Australia, all based in Sydney. Then when we went global and when we started to really scale, like, you can't do that, and watching on Zoom is even worse. It's even worse than being on the table. And so really, like, scaling how we did that. And so for your Canvaversary, when you hit your Canvaversary, you get this gorgeous Canva design of everyone saying really wonderful things about you, and everyone chimes in with pictures or videos or whatever it is. And then when you get your 5 years, you get a caricature added to that. And it's this kind of gorgeous moment of really seeing someone and celebrating them for all they are, with a bit of quirkiness, but without the, Mayflower dancing involved.
And I love that that's rooted in the product. You've brought, the thing that people are working on into that. And part of that aspect of scaling a culture also has to do with acquisition. So I know Canva has acquired quite a few companies. Having been front row to the San Francisco Standards acquisition of Charter, I know that an acquisition can bring so much opportunity, but also a lot of change to manage and a lot of challenges. So how did you think about culture when you went through these acquisitions?
Firstly, could I get a show of hands of anyone who's been through an acquisition on either side? Yeah. So you all know the pain of when this doesn't go right? I think everyone is aware of when this doesn't go right. It feels very painful on both sides. So we were very intentional. The 3 acquisitions that we did earliest were Flourish, which was a data visualization tool, Kaleido, which was a background remover tool, and Smart Mockups. And they were all 3 based in Europe, and they were during the pandemic. So they were really hard. I mean, we'd done 2 previously, but they were many, many years before when we were much smaller, so it's a bit easier. But these were the 3 that kind of we cut our teeth on, I would say. The biggest learning for us really was making sure the founders are incredibly aligned on the mission. I think it goes without saying, if that is kind of misaligned, things fall apart very quickly. So it's something we were very intentional on. Are the founders very aligned in how they operate in the product, but also how they treat their teams, making sure that that's set. The other thing we did was, when we acquired companies, we just left them alone for a while. I mean, you let the dust settle, you don't change anything on day one. You acquire this company because they were a great company and you think they run really well. Like, okay, we'll just leave it be. And also the people that were at that acquisition didn't sign up to work for Canva. They signed up to work for Flourish. And so just giving a bit of kind of downtime was incredibly important. And then I had individual conversations with all of the founders to say, what do you care about in your culture? What really matters to you? Like, what are your kind of tentpole moments or your anchors of your culture that you want to retain, and what is up for discussion? And we had those kind of live discussions. And then we did it slowly. So, for example, Flourish had been meaning to implement a performance management cycle, and they were like, oh, yours actually sounds great, we'll just have that and implement it here. Whereas Leonardo, who was an AI company that we acquired a few years ago, were like, oh, we're not interested in that yet. They didn't do it for an extra, I think, 1.5 years. And so just being fluid and flexible on those things, I think, really helps. If you've made a really good decision on the company that you want to buy, just organically letting it happen slower rather than faster. I think there's a lot of fallout when you try and do it too fast and not as intentional as you could.
That makes sense. And are there ways that these companies that you've acquired changed Canva's culture?
Huge, huge. So one of the best examples is Flourish, which is a company that was founded by 2 journalists in London. And as you can imagine, Australian culture is very relaxed, quite quirky. It's a bit different. The Brits, being a Brit myself, we were just like, what is this? Like, what is this? Like, they were watching season openers. There's someone in a massive inflatable costume. They're like, what are you doing? And so they gave a lot of feedback on, like, love it, but also, like, what is happening? And can we just have a straight answer on, like, what are going to be our goals for the next cycle? And so it was a really nice infusion of, that's probably some valid feedback as we're scaling globally and we're bringing on new cultures into our culture. And so they have infused a lot of feedback into how we operate and also time zones, right? Australia is not a particularly friendly time zone. And so making sure things are engaging globally that was probably the turning point, I think, for us taking that a lot more seriously.
That makes sense. Switching gears a little bit to something that is less fun, which is this conversation about layoffs that we're hearing. We heard it in the last panel as well. Even though Canva has avoided the mass layoffs we're seeing in a lot of other places in the tech industry, it feels hard to ignore everything that's going on. So how does Canva address the concerns, the anxiety, the burnout internally?
By openly talking about it, I think it's really important to, and I loved Katie's point earlier on not making any resolute statements. I think that is the first thing. And I think being really truthful with the team on, we have been incredibly intentional with our hiring for a long while. And we've been incredibly intentional with upskilling our team as much as we possibly can and making sure people have as many opportunities as they can to step into new roles so that we could avoid hiring above where we were. And so I think being really mindful of sharing that internally is kind of step one. And also acknowledging that that might mean that you didn't get a hire for your team that you really wanted and was really important, but it was part of something bigger. And so making sure there was common language around that they heard from us rather than kind of whispers through. And to be fair, we didn't do a great job at that a lot earlier. And so we learned through that. We learned through the Pulse employee listening that we weren't doing a good enough job at that. So just addressing it openly. And then addressing openly, hey, these are the concerns, and we know that there are layoffs happening, and we know this is happening. This is how we're trying to mitigate. This is what we're trying to do, and this is what your role is in it. So making sure that it's an open conversation, but it's also both ways, which I feel like is a huge part of Canva's culture. A lot of when people talk about culture more broadly, they also talk about kind of culture being something that the company has, and I believe kind of culture is in every single individual. That is your culture, who you have and who you hire, and how they feel part of whatever you're doing, and they have a role to play in that.
I know these conversations were a big part of your recent AI Learning Week. So can you tell us a little bit more about how that worked and how that fits into this larger conversation?
Yeah, so in AI Discovery Week, we've done twice now. So we gave the company the week off for twice, once last year, once about 3 weeks ago. We heard from our teams in the People Pulse, which is our guide, when we look at those guiding stars, of hey, what would make the biggest impact for you in the next 6 months? The biggest thing was I just want time. I'm trying to deliver on my goals. I'm trying to learn what AI is. There's new things coming out every day. It's very overwhelming. I just need some time. And so we decided to lay down the tools on the goals side of things and give the team the week. And so how we designed it was 3 days of learning, 2 days of hackathon. And the 3 days of learning were internal experts, external experts, people that we could get in to really showcase what AI could do to help people upskill as fast as they can, just with that spare time. We definitely learned from the first one that the first AI Discovery Week we did was incredibly academic. The second one we did was far more hands-on, and so we definitely got better feedback as we went. But it meant that we were living up to the values and the commitments that we'd given to the team around AI, which was, AI is definitely coming. There's nothing we can do about it, and it could be a real force multiplier if we do this right. And so we are committed to giving everyone the best tools that we possibly can and getting those into your hands. We're committed to sharing learnings across the company as much as we can. So we've got an AI Everywhere channel that I think 3,900 people have opted into to just share learnings. It's about 10 posts a day. And making sure that we committed time for learning as well. And so really living up to those commitments to say, hey, layoffs are a real thing. This is what we're trying to do to avoid it. As part of that, we're going to upskill and really invest in everyone's learning here. And this is a real commitment to that.
You also mentioned this idea of sustainable growth, being very intentional about who you bring onto the team, which I think is part of the conversation about layoffs that we're seeing right now in the tech industry. So I'm curious, how do you implement sustainable growth? How do you think about hiring at Canva in a way that doesn't create possible layoffs down the line?
I think one of the first things is, like I said earlier, is really leveraging the team that you have. I mean, there's so many, 5,500 people, there's so many people that have got incredible skills that you might not even know about. And so one of the big changes that we made was opening up internal pathways at Canva, which is our kind of internal jobs board. And so if you go into any of the Canva offices anywhere around the world, the screens that play screens of the jobs that are open and who to talk to about them. So product managers, internal finance people, and then we also show success stories of people that have moved from one discipline to another. So we've had a couple of finance people leave the finance team and join the operations team, and 2 joined from legal into product design, and making sure that you're sharing those stories of, the discipline you're in might not be the discipline forever, and actually that context, all the context and skills that you've built leaving Canva would be the worst thing. What would be great is applying that context elsewhere internally and making sure that we're leveraging that team. So I think it starts from growing your team in a really intentional way and really sharing those success stories as much as possible, which shines a big light. And then on top of that, only bringing in new roles that really bring in new skills into the team that you don't already have or couldn't build fast enough. So AI proficiency being one of them, and making sure that you're really leveraging that skills only rather than just people.
I know that you yourself went through a pretty big pivot early in your career into people operations. Can you just share a little bit more about your background and how that's informed your thinking around those?
Yeah. So for context, I come from operations background. I worked in operations in startups. I actually joined Canva as the executive assistant to the founders. And then not long after, I think it was about a week after, they said, hey, I think we're going to shift this. So they moved me into what we called leadership operations, which is essentially a chief of staff role. I stayed in that for about 18 months, worked on some amazing projects that I'm very, very proud of, and then moved into the people team about 4 years ago. And I've been there ever since. I mean, I moved in as an interim role, and so I'm still waiting for the day. But it's been a really fun journey. But there's many others like me at Canva, for example. Our CMO started as an intern in the marketing team. And so we think a bit differently about talent at Canva, I would say, to what I hear my peers in the industry talk about. So another example that we really love is one of the best AI researchers that we have, we hired because he was incredibly active on a Discord community, but at the time he was working stacking shelves in a supermarket. And so I think it's really important. You can find this talent in so many places, and he is incredibly effective internally, but it's everywhere, right? I think if you start to think outside the box, and it's kind of why I had a bit of a reaction to kind of war on talent, of like, well, yeah, if you're fighting for all the same talent, for the same pedigree at the same companies or the same schools, I think it's very easy to get lost in that talent. Whereas actually, if you think a bit differently and outside of the box, there are incredible people who have great impact that might come from different backgrounds that you just need to think about a bit differently. And that's not to say that, you know, you can build an entire company of this kind of talent. I think it's important to also leverage amazing people who have been through this kind of scale before. So, for example, we brought on Kelly from Zoom, who's joined as our CFO, and Simon Newton, who is now our head of engineering, came from background in Google and Uber, and bringing in people who have seen scale before. But you can then fuse together the people that have kind of been homegrown talent that grew through the organization, like me or Zach, our CMO, and fuse them together with those external talents to make sure that there's kind of a bit of both, two sides of the same coin.
That makes sense. And so when you're thinking about rolling out this kind of strategy, how do you train and prepare individual hiring managers to find and identify the right skills and look in unexpected places?
Yeah, so I think in the session before they talked about the importance of onboarding, which I definitely agree with. I think the step before that is your hiring playbooks and how you hire. And I think the same goes for the learning that I shared before. I think it's in storytelling, right? It's in the storytelling of, you know, and this is the fundamentals that everyone kind of does on, you know, here's how to hire, here's the questions, here's the rubrics that you should use, and I think that's a bit of a given. What we try and do on top of that is to play through the stories of, you know, this was amazing talent and this is how we found them. And so making sure that the recruiters know that firstly, and then hiring managers are also looking for that. So look out for biases, make sure that, you know, you're not just going for the person that worked at the big tech companies that are fun and sexy and they kind of have done it before, but also make sure you're also looking for these kind of skills, or you're asking these kind of questions to get the best from someone of something they might have done, and to ask hiring managers to think outside the box with those stories in mind.
That makes sense. And as a final question, what are the top skills, capacities, attributes that you're looking to hire for right now?
I think it would probably range differently across all of Canva, and depending on what discipline you're in. Something that I am really looking for is curiosity, I think, is a baseline. I think in a world that's moving as fast as today with so much changing, and I think you have to be curious as the first bit. You have to be learning. It's something we're asking all of our leaders to make sure they are doing is, you know, prototyping. Like, I'm spending time prototyping things that I can then show to my engineering team to say, I want to build this as our internal tool. I think making sure that people are curious about what could happen. And then I think the other thing that I really want to be leveraging more and more as we go is making sure that people feel like they are responsible for our culture. And so when you ask someone like, oh, like, why do you want to join Canva? If they just talk about taking, I think it's a signal that, you know, we want to build a culture of givers who are going to give to that culture as much as they experience it. I think that's one of the most important things as you scale, to make sure that culture stays at the heart of everything that you do.
I love that, the culture of givers. With that, thank you so much, Jennie.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Yeah. And next, I'll welcome to the stage Jenna McGregor, Charter's Managing Editor.